Hey there, this is the Kershaw Vapor II, model number 1650 that we're looking at today. I bought this a couple years ago, and I bought it locally, and it was gently used. This is either the second or the third time that I've owned this particular model. I don't remember exactly, but I have owned it once, I think twice before, several years back, maybe around 2005 or 2006. It's one of those knives that just keeps coming back to my collection. Seems I can't get away from it. Basic specs on it: blade length 3.5 inches, give or take. Overall length about 8.2 inches. That was from the manufacturer's website, and I measured it, and that jives pretty well. My measurements might be off just a little bit, but it's pretty close. Weight is 4.6 ounces according to the manufacturer, and on my scale it comes out at 4.4. And I tend to agree with my scale, so I think it's probably a little bit lighter than that. 4.4 ounces is what it seems to be. It's made of AUS 6 steel, and the handles are also stainless steel. They're made from 410. And you can see that the entire knife has a bead blasted finish. So it's got sort of a dull, slightly shiny, slightly matte appearance to it. As you see there, we do indeed have a pocket clip. Unfortunately, it is right side tip down only. So we have no left side carry and no tip up carry for righties. So fairly limited in our method of carry there. Also, I should note while we're talking about the pocket clip, despite the fact that there are, as you can see, many holes in the handles, none of them are a lanyard hole, and the knife, when closed, actually comes in contact with each one of those holes, even right down to the smallest ones and the ones on the back. So none of them would be suitable to put a lanyard through. So that's kind of a bummer. It seems like they could have made maybe one small extra one at the very back, but no lanyard carry. So you either can just put it in your pocket with no clip, or, like I mentioned before, right side tip down carry only. It is a drop point blade, and we have a bit of a recurve there, so ever so slightly recurved in the middle. For some of you, depending on your sharpening system, that might make things a little bit difficult as far as maintaining that edge, but it does slice very well, and we do have a full flat grind for the entire blade, and it works very well. Nice slicing ability. Obviously, we do have skeletonized handles. So certainly that was to reduce some of the weight, this being all stainless steel. That was some effort to lighten the knife itself, and also, you know, add a little bit of visual appeal. And it does have quite a bit of jimping or serrations on the handle. We've got some at the back of the handle at the spine, some up at the top, and that also meets with the blade. So it's got matching jimping right where you rest your thumb in your typical grip there. You might even place your index finger on there for fine cutting, and then some in the finger choil area, right at the base of the blade there. And those are all very grippy, lots of traction. So it holds well in your hand, despite the fact, and you can tell they did it obviously once again because we've got this smooth bead blasted finish. They wanted to give you as much texturing and positive grip as they could, and it works pretty well. Handle comfort, since we're talking about that, is excellent. It's very comfortable. There's no hot spots or points of irritation anywhere. Using the knife for extended periods of time, I've never had any comfort issues. It is quite comfortable. As far as balance goes, it's quite handle heavy, and you could probably kind of tell just by, you know, noting the design overall. So it tends to, you know, if you're holding it, it's kind of falling back in your hand versus being blade heavy or being, you know, very well centered. It's pretty handle heavy, but it's not really a big issue as far as comfort or long-term use. And it carries pretty good in your pocket. You've got about 3/4 of an inch of the pocket clip will be sticking out, but it's so slim. You know, it's such a narrow design that it slides in your pocket well. My only complaint being the weight. It's pretty heavy. I think that 4.6 ounces adds up pretty quick, especially if you got a lot of other stuff either hanging off your pants or in your pockets, you'll notice. And as we were talking about the right hand side tip down carry only, this is also only a single thumb stud on here. You can see it there, and it opens quickly enough. Again, it's very obviously designed only for right-handed carry, and I'm not really sure why they didn't bother trying to make it, you know, completely ambidextrous. But once again, if you are left-handed, you're kind of out of luck unless you have some, if you got some fancy finger work and you can open it better with your left hand than I can. Otherwise, I would recommend it for righties only. And the thumb stud is very pokey. It's very high and pointy, and it's not very comfortable. It can be painful. In fact, when I first got not only this used model that I picked up a couple years ago, but even further a few years back, the first time that I owned this, I found the ramp to be painful and the pivot to be very tight. So when I first got it, it was a chore to open it, and it really took a lot of pressure to get the blade out. I actually loosened the pivot screw on this one to make it easier to get the blade out. Unfortunately, the side effect of that is the blade is no longer centered in the handle. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. Obviously, you can tell we're looking at a frame lock design here. So you've got that one portion that's cut on the one handle, and it goes under the blade tang. This is what a lot of people would call late lockup, I believe. You can see that that portion of the handle that locks underneath the blade tang is quite a bit over to the right. The nice part though is that because it's so thick, even if it went all the way to the right, it's not going to wedge itself between the opposite handle scale and the base of the blade. So you should still get a nice positive lockup, no matter what. Again, blade centering, I'll show you there. In order to loosen it to where it was comfortable for me to flick the knife open, or even just to open it slowly without it hurting my hand much, in order to get it to that point, I had to loosen the blade significantly at the pivot, and as a result, the blade moves very far over to that side. It's not rubbing that handle side, but it doesn't look great. As far as any play or wobble or wiggle, it's got a little bit of side to side, but only because I loosened that pivot screw. Before I did, it was rock solid, and vertically up and down, none to speak of. And it's got a good solid lockup, and I am very confident in the lockup. It's a frame lock that I think that you can put a lot of trust in, and I don't expect it to fold or close on me at any time during any task. I think it stays closed very well, and it really shouldn't be any kind of an issue. As far as the overall design, I'm pretty happy with it. I don't really care for the holes in the handle. I know that they did that for the weight, and I know there's a few other Ken Onion designed knives that have that same type of texturing, the little holes milled out. But I think overall, it looks pretty good. It's not my favorite, but for the price, I think that it's nicely designed. Overall fit and finish is pretty good, other than just some issues like that thumb stud that's not really my favorite. For the most part, it's very well ground. It's finished nicely. The grinds on the blade are pretty good. Again, for the price from the factory, I think that the grinds are pretty good. While I'm talking about the finish, I will say the bead blasting, as I've mentioned in other videos, is not my favorite finish type, and it does seem to invite rust. And in fact, this knife has quite a bit of rust on the blade. Most of it I've cleaned off. I've tried to polish it a little bit. I actually need to go get a halfway decent polishing agent to clear it off. You can kind of see the leftovers, the remnants of that rust. It's almost like a patina, but the real rough orange patches of rust are gone now. And there is a little bit in the handle as well. It's not going to come out very well in the video, and it's actually not that big of a deal. If you keep it oiled and you put it away properly when you're done using it, it won't be that big of a deal, but it's just something that if it had a different finish, at least on the blade, I think that it would have helped to prevent that a little bit, and that would have been my preference. Very good for everyday utility tasks, just for general slicing, cutting open boxes, tape, all the usual stuff, packaging, cutting up fruit. I've used it to slice up many an apple and it performs perfectly in any of those tasks. I won't really talk about self-defense, as I basically don't use my knives in that way, but I would have every confidence in it if I did. I don't see any other than, you know, grip issues. It being a little bit slick in a tense situation, I think that you'd be fine. But that's all I'll say about that. Overall, you know, opinion of Kershaw products, I'm really happy with them. I really like their stuff. I'm a fan. I have a lot of Kershaw knives. I've owned a lot in the past that I've sold or traded, and they always seem to come back into my hands. So I'm really happy with their designs and with their quality. You know, their customer service is amazing. Something I should mention real quick is because it does have that weird thumb stud, that kind of ramped Devo hat design. I did notice when I was looking online at this knife for any variants, looking at the older version, I guess there's a new one coming out or is out, the Vapor 3. There was one version of the Vapor 2 that has a different thumb stud. It's a lot closer to the Kershaw Blur, where it's kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, it's sort of a half cutaway thumb ramp for the thumb stud. And I imagine they did that because they were getting complaints about this style. And so what I think I'll do is I'm gonna speak to Kershaw. I'll either call him or email him and see if there's some way that I can get a replacement, because as you can see, this one uses a Phillips screw in order to remove and replace. And I thought I'd see if maybe I could get one from them, if I could purchase one and replace it. And if that works out, then I will post another video discussing that. But yeah, I really like Kershaw, and I actually imagine that that's not going to be a problem with that request, as long as that thumb stud is replaceable. I'm sure they'll be able to get one out to me. For some size comparisons, I always like to do these with some popular knives in case you want to see how it's going to measure up. There's the Kershaw Leek that everyone loves so much. If you don't own one, by all means, go out and pick one up. Wonderful knife. And a Kershaw Skyline for a little length comparison there. Thickness, let me close them all and turn them on their side so you can see the thickness. It's very slim, and it is quite similar to the Leek. So if you've got one of those and you know how slim that rides in the pocket, then this will be just about the same. Excellent profile, excellent width. Wish it was a little bit lighter, but by no means a deal breaker. It does open very fast, by the way. Once I loosen that pivot, it jumps right out. I just don't really care for that thumb stud. And I'm actually being a little bit ginger when I open it because I nicked my thumb on a Swiss Army knife. Maybe I'll explain that in another video, but it does open very fast, closes quickly. And here's a Swiss Army knife. This is my Tinker that I like to use in my comparisons, again, just to show you a size comparison. If you've got one of these larger sized Victorinox knives, that'll give you some indicator of how it's going to fit in your pocket or in your hand. And here's an interesting thing I noted. This is the SOG Flash 2, and what I found was that these knives, as far as their size and even their overall shape, they're kind of similar. So they're very similar in the closed position lengthwise, and just as similar when they're both open. Even they both got that full flat ground blade and very similar shape, very similar style. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So if you have that Flash 2, that'll really be a good indicator of how that's going to compare. And as far as comparisons, if I were going to choose another knife instead of it, it's for the materials that are in it, it's kind of in a class of its own. So it fills a certain void that not a lot of other knives, from other brands really fit into that, as far as the material, the size, and the shape and the design. Probably the closest really is just Kershaw's own Leek. As far as the materials, the overall finish, it's obviously it's a little bit smaller or shorter in the blade. But those two are probably going to be the closest, and even price-wise, for this one you'll probably pay anywhere from $22 to maybe $27 before shipping, maybe even with shipping, depending on where you're buying from. I think on Amazon you can get one for about $25 to $27, and the Leek is probably going to run you closer between $30 and $40. But that's about the closest I can think of. So my overall impressions are that it's a very nice knife. If you don't mind that weight, that nearly 5 ounces can be a little bit bulky for some of us, and it's the reason that I don't carry mine more often. I use this one more around the house, but for the price, for about 25 to, like I said, 27 bucks, it's a great, beater knife. It's a great knife to just have on hand that it'll take a lot of abuse. If you take care of it, it'll last you for years. The overall design, that open back design that it has, forgive me for not mentioning that before, means it's very easy to clean. And because it is overall, stainless steel, it's going to hold up really nicely over the years. Just clean it, oil it to prevent that finish from rusting, and it should bring you years and years of wonderful service. So it's not my favorite knife, but for the price, I think it's very stout. It's decently heavy duty, and if you don't mind the weight, I think you'll be really pleased with it. So that's it. That's my overall view. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you very much for watching. Bye.